as I started this film. Anybody that I talked to said Peanuts was a big part of their life in some way.
That's awesome.
Well, the essence of the film goes back to just wanting to do something that was really worthy of my dad's work.
The most important thing we had to get right on the Peanuts movie is everything. We had to get the animation right. We had to get the voices right. We had to get the story right.
And we here at the studio feel a huge responsibility to take care of these characters. But I can tell you within like minutes of meeting Steve Martino, I knew we were going to be in good hands.
The dedication to doing it right was apparent from the beginning.
You feel like you are able to inhabit the world that you have always read on the strip in a new way. And I actually think Schulz would really like that.
What I love about Charles Schulz's work is that he didn't deal with moments that were only relevant for that particular day or time. He dealt with universal ideas.
Peanuts touched on subjects that continue and will continue for, I think, generations.
In the cartoons, you see all the problems, all the issues, all the hopes that we all deal with every day, whether we're adults or children.
It was about the insecurities of being a kid and being a person in the world.
I've seen the type of person you are. An insecure, wishy-washy failure?
These characters go through life struggles that we all do. It's universal. What it means to be loved, what it means to be accepted, what it means to try, to fail, and to pick yourself back up and go at it.
Look, I did it! Hey, Charlie Brown. Still no luck, huh?
Schulz, as a writer, was not afraid to be vulnerable, and people respond to vulnerability in a powerful way.
He had great insight into the human condition, and I think by conveying that through children's innocent eyes, took the viewer, I think, into a world they had never been before.
He's not too self-conscious to say, I'm afraid of things, I'm afraid people don't like me. I mean, these are powerful sentiments to put out, so I just think he connects with readers in that way.
My dad always said that when you draw something, it has to have a funny look to it, whether it be a shoe, a watch, a desk, whatever. It has to have an element of humor to it. So you have the visual humor of the kids and the kind of funny look to them with the big heads and so forth. Yet the contradiction there was their deep thoughts and how they were really touching upon all the social conditions at the time.
That's the one thing that was so great in the way that Charles Schulz presented, Snoopy, Charlie Brown, Linus, and the rest of the gang, is that it was always with a laugh.
45 million people still read the Peanuts comic strips to this day, which is an amazing legacy. The themes are universal. People in any country can relate to trying to kick the football and it gets pulled out. That means the same thing in every language, whether you know what a football is or not.
It crosses cultural barriers because while it might be perceived as very American, is it really? Because all over the world, someone can look at a panel with just Snoopy and bring their own experience to that.
I was stunned to hear the statistic there was a 95% planet awareness of Snoopy in terms of how many people just could look at Snoopy and know who it was around the world.
The comic strip and many of the things that Charles Schulz created were a part of my life. They're a part of my growing up. The specials were such a big deal. I was 7 years old when the Christmas special first came on, and that became a tradition every single year for me. We would gather around the TV, our entire family, and it was an event.
Schulz was always a big fan when Bill Melendez took his characters and animated them.
Bill Melendez did the voice of Snoopy, the voice of Woodstock, and he was the director of the original TV specials.
So Schulz wasn't an animator, but he appreciated what animators could do with his work and his vision.
I think there was a certain magic in that first Christmas show. It was such a great bump for CBS that they said the next day they wanted another blockbuster, they called it. So they then wrote the Halloween special.
Every single year was the same thing. You watch the Halloween special, then a couple weeks later you watch Thanksgiving, and then you watch the Christmas special at the end of the year.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
There were no VCRs in '65, and you had to wait a year to see it, so you loved it, and you could hardly wait to see it again.
We're always trying to match the expression that your dad got in the strip. That is such an emotive drawing right there that we want to hit that in our animation.
The family all along has said we would never ever do a movie. We didn't want to take the chance on having someone do a bad movie. I talked to the family, I said, at some point someone will do a movie, so why don't we do one with someone that really understands Peanuts?
3.5 years ago, Craig Schultz, he and I got together and he started to tell me about an idea that he had for a feature film with these Peanuts characters.
We didn't want to have this movie be an hour and a half of just vignettes of everybody's favorite moments in the Peanuts world. The story had to hold up on its own.
All of us on the Peanuts movie really wanted to make sure we kept the exact same amount of humor and heart that the original comic strips had. We're all very protective of the Peanuts brand and of the Peanuts characters and of the Peanuts tone.
Girls want someone with proven success. What are your real estate holdings? Do you have a diversified portfolio? Huh?
The Peanuts movie is a real love letter to anybody who is a fan of the original strips and all the original specials, because director Steve Martino and the Schulz family and the Blue Sky Animation team, we're all going for the same goal, and it's just so exciting to be part of this.
Peanuts was a big part of my life, and I love these characters. So this was an opportunity to introduce these characters to a whole new generation. Charlie Brown, the craziness of Snoopy. And my hope is that this film can add to that wonderful collection of moments that for a new generation of kids and for fans and parents who have loved the Peanuts characters, that this can be another big event for them. When we started this project, Craig Schultz came to Blue Sky, and Craig stood up in front of everybody and said, my father's friends and the people that he collaborated with referred to him as Sparky.
When he was a baby, one of his uncles gave him the nickname. It's based on an old comic called Barney Google. And in Barney Google, there was a character named Sparkplug that they called Sparky, and that's where his nickname came from.
And Craig said, I want you to refer to him as Sparky on this movie because he would have enjoyed collaborating with you. And that was so emotional for me because I have such great reverence for the work that he created.
So to make sure we're staying true to like Sparky's designs and making sure we're using the poses, we actually bring his actual drawings into Maya so we can stay true to it.
He was the person you would want the creator of Peanuts to be. Really down to earth, really approachable, super nice guy, kind of shy, typical cartoonist.
Well, he was both simple and complex. He was simple in that his tastes were simple, but obviously his mind was very complex because he was living with those characters all the time and twisting the things that he observed in his world into a comic strip.
He knew at 4 years old he wanted to be a cartoonist, just plain and simple. It's what he wanted to do his entire life. He was very persistent. It didn't matter if he got rejected, it didn't matter. People didn't think it was good. He stayed true to himself. So he came to work, had his breakfast, and went over, and he drew every single day.
So in about 1947, he was working on a strip called Little Folks, which was centered around little kids, and a dog would appear occasionally, and it appeared in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, which was a local paper in Minnesota.
And eventually, he did get picked up by a syndicate in New York, and they renamed it Peanuts. And if you look at the very early strips, they don't really look like Peanuts the way we know Peanuts looks.
The comic strip started in 1950, and it's fascinating to look at Peanuts through the history of the 50 years that it was drawn. You know, they started off at the heart with Charlie Brown, and the other characters were very small and minimal. You didn't even see Lucy in the original comic strips, and Snoopy was just a normal dog.
I love to read the strips from the 50s and the early 60s because you see him evolving as a cartoonist, and you see him sort of working out what works and what doesn't.
And when Schultz started drawing Peanuts, there was a lot of attention paid to the background, and some point In the 1960s, it starts becoming very minimalistic.
It's amazing to watch the run of the comic strip and see how his artistic approach changed and evolved through that time.
There's certain characters in the early strip that drop off later. You sort of see him creating the core cast that he's going to stay with for the rest of the time.
But he really couldn't nail the birds until right around the late 60s. He finally got the birds looking funny. Woodstock, he didn't come into evolution until 1969 when the concert came out.
To see that he worked on this comic strip for 50 years. Can you imagine doing anything for 50 years? Getting up every day and trying to be fresh, come up with a new idea, to continue to create something that would be invigorating, new, and not be retreading old material? That's amazing to me.
He had very dedicated work ethic. He told his children always, he said, I think you guys should always get up and have a place to go every morning and do something. And, you know, and his work ethic was to get up every morning, come down to the Warm Puppy, he'd have breakfast, he'd walk over, do the mail, and then he'd go into the office and he'd draw cartoons until 3 or 4 in the afternoon.
He was always notoriously 8 weeks ahead on his dailies, and I mean, I think he just loved what he did, so to him it wasn't a job, so he was working all the time.
He worked on the story himself, he inked the strip himself, so he put a lot of work into it, and so that's over 18,000 strips.
He took deadlines very seriously, and he told me specifically that he felt like he had a responsibility to newspapers and to the people who worked in all the supporting industries that Peanuts was affiliated with, that he had a responsibility to them to deliver a good comic.
They're just lovable, well-drawn characters that people identify with. There's humanity there, and there's a fun to them that it's hard to deny it.
But with 50 years of the comic strip, one of the challenges was to decide which era would we draw these characters from. We decided that the 1980s was going to be our sweet spot in terms of the design. That's where the characters really had settled into their look.
From Snoopy walking on 4 feet to standing up and dancing. And so the characters in the movie are the fully formed characters. They're not evolving anymore, but the medium is evolving.
My dad always said, if you read the comic strip, you know who I am, and you can see that all the characters in the comic strip are really, elements of him.
You can't draw it, you can't tell the story if they're not inside of you. So they're all a part of him. And obviously, Charlie Brown and Snoopy are the two who were the most like Sparky.
The key is keeping a low profile. For now, we just keep our distance. Ah! Snoopy! No!
Snoopy is the person he would like to be, totally carefree, totally doing whatever you want to do, no matter how absurd. And Charlie Brown, he has the same insecurities. Do people like me? So those characters, they came out of Sparky's authentic personality.
Congratulations, you're now on your way to becoming a winner. Step 1, forget everything you ever knew about yourself.
Trying to pick your favorite Peanuts character is absolutely impossible. But the thing I love about Charlie Brown is that he is an eternal optimist. He wakes up every morning and says, today is the day that's going to be good, and just gets hammered down and hammered down throughout the day. But then wakes up completely reset and is optimistic and goes into the next day saying it's going to be just as good.
I've got my kite. Today's the day. I can feel it.
What's great about Snoopy in this story is that he's by Charlie Brown's side, throughout the entire quest to be that winner, to be that hero.
I think people read comics for entertainment and escape, and Snoopy's the ultimate vehicle for escape, because even though he exists in these small panels, his imagination allows him to have no boundaries.
Snoopy's imagination, it's just, you're flying, you're in the air, it's cinematic, it's dramatic. I think all kids hopefully will take away a lesson of that it's okay to just go put your head in the clouds and just dream and be whatever you want to be.
With Snoopy, he has such an energy and a presence, and he's so fun and entertaining to watch. He is the mischievous character who's always doing something funny.
Huh? Oh, good grief.
What's great fun with Snoopy and Woodstock, they're like Laurel and Hardy. They're that great pantomime duo. They play off of one another.
And sometimes they're arguing, sometimes they're on adventures with each other. But at the end of the day, there's just a genuine friendship between Snoopy and Woodstock.
I got dog jerk!
What we learned, our characters like Lucy began to develop later in the 50s, early 60s. All of a sudden, she became quite a presence.
You blockhead! What kind of a person tries to fly a kite in the middle of winter?
She's just more honest. She kind of doesn't have that filter that we all have as adults, and so she just kind of says what's on her mind.
Look into this mirror, Charlie Brown. This is the face of failure.
But she's got that wonderful Achilles heel as well, because she, really has eyes for Schroeder, and he doesn't really care about about Lucy.
Oh, Schroeder!
He wants to be at his piano. When we look at Linus is that good and steady friend who's by Charlie Brown's side, and he sees those wonderful qualities that Charlie Brown has always had.
It might be time to consider the wild possibility that you're a good person and that people like you.
Here's this kid with his security blanket, and yet from his mouth comes some of the most wise and insightful lines in the movie.
Charlie Brown, the insight you bring to such a complex novel is beyond reproach.
Linus is just very philosophical, and he spends a lot of time thinking about life, and he expounds on that to people whether they like it or not.
A sweet baboo!
One of my favorite characters growing up was Charlie Brown's little sister, Sally. She's one of the funniest because she is often off topic. Everybody else is rolling along with an idea, and she'll spurt out some funny line that is completely off topic but hilarious.
That's over 37 years of school! I'll be bald and wrinkly by then!
The reason why these characters land with all of us is because they are all of us. Each one is somebody you can identify with. If you're the athlete, you got Peppermint Patty. If you're the bookish kid, you got Marcy.
Sir!
2! No, 3! Was I close?
Class hasn't started yet, sir.
We've got Pigpen with his dust, but what I love about Pigpen is he owns it. He's very dignified in his dirt.
I've always wanted to dance with Pigpen.
Ugh, yuck.
And Franklin's got a really interesting role in our film. At school, he's the MC. He's the guy front and center stage at the microphone. But what I love is the background of the character.
47 years ago, I wrote a letter in 1968 to Charles Schulz just after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I had this feeling that I wanted to do something. I wrote a letter to Mr. Schulz asking if he would put a black child in the script. And we exchanged some letters, and shortly after that, Franklin appeared.
Charlie Brown and Franklin first met July 31st, 1968 on the beach, and they started to have a conversation. And I think it's a real good relationship because that shows that it doesn't matter what your skin color is, everybody can be friends.
Franklin and Peppermint Patty are on my team.
I got my hockey stick. I got my skates.
I'm beyond excited. It's a dream. It really is. I guess I'm overwhelmed because to me, and all through these 47 years since I wrote it, it's obviously affected a lot of people.
How about that, Charlie Brown?
But for Charlie Brown in this story, the character of most importance is the little red-haired girl.
The original little red-haired girl was a woman who worked at art instruction with Sparky. She worked in the secretarial pool, and he used to walk by her desk and draw a little figure on her desk pad.
He knew she had another boyfriend, and she had to make the choice between a cartoonist and a fireman, and she chose the fireman, and she lived happily ever after.
We've all had somebody we've admired from afar, and so he just kept bringing that back into the comic strip.
She says, "Dear Charlie Brown, I want to tell you how sad I am that little red-haired girl won't eat lunch with you. I'd be proud to eat lunch with you any day, and I'll even bring the peanut butter sandwiches." Tell her I think that's very nice, and to meet Charlie Brown at noon tomorrow. Okay?
I'll write to you, pen pal.
All right,
right, come with us. We're gonna show you how we make movies here at Blue Sky.
Snoopy comes in, he snatches them up from him.
He's looking around and he looks on model. When we're up flying with Snoopy, we want it to be much more dynamic.
Flies closer and closer and faster and faster.
Charlie Brown!
The beginning of this process for us, there's a tremendous amount of research that we put into this movie. We want to be true to these characters, true to who they are in personality, but deliver an experience that is big and action-packed. From my perspective, we're painting on a bigger canvas than any of the previous work that's been done in Peanuts. And we embrace that.
When I first found out they were going to be making a CGI 3D version of Peanuts, I had concerns, and I think other people who heard about that did too, because you always worry they're going to try to turn it into something that it's not.
But it is the next sort of natural step because kids and modern audiences, this is the way they experience characters. And I feel like Steve and the animation team did an amazing job of making it not feel like CG.
I love the way the Doghouse is doing a full rotation and yet you're keeping Snoopy in perfect Peanuts poses.
They have spent a year figuring out how to make their CG animation look like Bill Melendez old cartoons. And I think that they did that out of their dedication to being true to what the public loved about Peanuts.
There's a handmade quality. There was a way that Charles Schulz drew these characters. They weren't perfect. There was a wobble to the line. Charlie Brown's collar always was a little misshapen, was a little ruffled. What's been great is that all of these strips that you guys sent out have been inspiring our team. As we go through and we look at poses, the way your dad drew these characters, the way he framed for shots. We come through here on a daily basis and use this as our reference, which is very helpful.
You look at his lines, they're not clean and crisp. They have just a wonderful character to them that sort of looks like a wobble, it sort of looks like a back and forth, it sort of looks like a squiggle. It's almost hard to describe, but when you see it, you know it.
But just to be able to draw a wobbly line is not even, half the equation. It has to always feel spontaneous and a little bit organic. It has to feel like the hand has been in there at some point, like it's hand-drawn.
Now, one of the things about computers love to make things perfectly. And what I've got here at Blue Sky, we've got a wonderful team of artists who love to beat the perfection out of what the computer creates so that we get that handmade feel. And what I love about our animation team, they did the research and they looked at what Bill Melendez had created in the TV specials. They looked carefully at the drawings that Sparky created in the comic strip. And they created Van Pelt University. It was like a week-long course for every animator to go through. It was like Peanuts boot camp.
Van Pelt University is a school that my co-supervisor Scott and I created. And what it is to help educate all the animators coming on to the film about everything that is Peanuts. Just getting a feel for the history of the strip, the specials, and then from there, we have them do a couple poses trying to match something directly from a comic. And we reinforce that there is no straying from the comic.
We have a whole nother set of style guide, including how to pose each individual foot. So this is something that Nick put together called the foot breakfast. So it's the foot looks like bread. Make sure when it's up, it looks like sausage. And this goes on and on. Whether this is the foot breakfast, you can start talking about the motion from Bill Melendez. You got legs and feet. This thing just goes on and on and on.
If the line is just a little bit to the left or to the little bit to the right, or if an eyeball is just a little bit too close to the nose, it all of a sudden doesn't look like Charlie Brown anymore. So the challenge is to really spend a lot of time studying the work that he did.
The real challenge of making the 2D characters three-dimensional is that they were never meant to be. Sparky took huge liberties in the way the characters actually look, from front view, from side view. Whenever they look up, their mass and their proportions change drastically. So they're not three-dimensional true objects where you could actually make a model and turn it around.
Sparky drew his characters in about 6 positions. And so what we decided is that we were going to animate these characters to match those iconic poses.
We sort of learned that the characters were only really drawn within certain views. Like he would have sort of what we call the Sparky view, which is sort of like a front 3/4 view, and then we would have like the profile view. And a lot of the strips were only really within those 2 views, but with broad emotion within them.
It established for us a very unique and interesting animation style where, for example, I'm looking at you front on and then I'm deciding to turn, I'm going to snap, and in a frame I'm going to be in that profile drawing. Because that in-between frame, that doesn't look like Peanuts at all.
It was liberating in a lot of ways because you had to think outside of the box, so to speak, in order to get the same kind of things across, the same kind of movements across, to get dancing across, but in a fun way that also everybody recognized as Peanuts. All these little things that make his drawing so special and charming, all that stuff had to get channeled and distilled down into sort of a digestible tome that we could pass on to the crew. For the dance sequence, we went back to the specials, especially the Christmas special where you see all of them dancing on the stage. They're very specific, iconic Peanuts dances. Pigpens is one of my favorite ones. That's kind of a new one. It's very funny.
Do I know you? Huh?
And then when Snoopy had to dance, the flamingo dance is a big one. We had him dancing across the floor, but he's kind of really sliding all the way across. Like you don't really see the foot contact. It's all kind of sleight of hand. There's a lot of sleight of hand in this movie when it comes to animation.
We're playing around with the use of multiples. We'll animate on, like the drawing here, we may animate on 4 Snoopies as he's spinning in action, and then he'll land and he'll be that single character, but it creates that very active movement that we see in the strip. When you've got such simple little eyes like Charles Schulz drew, basically 2 little ink drops, you have to find innovative ways to create expression.
Some of the animation too that you guys are incorporating these lines that we call kind of Schulz lines that really show movement and motion and stuff.
Yeah, my favorite is when somebody gets knocked in the head and they get that little, that kind of little spinning line. One of the challenges was, how do you make a character look to the left or look to the right? We create this style, and Sparky drew this in the comic strip. We refer to it as the 6s and 9s.
When Charlie looks extreme one direction or another, we use pretty much, it's like a 6 is the shape of it, when he looks like sort of down and extreme to the left. And then if he's sort of looking up, we call that a 9, which is like pretty much like drawing a 9 shape.
And that makes it feel like the character is driving his pupil over to the edge of the eye socket to give you that feeling that he's looking left or looking right.
So we basically found a way to stay true to Charles Schulz's language and to his design, but transfer it over in a 3D way.
But within the movie, the fun thing about the movie is not only if you look at the movie itself, but if you look in the background, you'll see all sorts of Easter eggs that Steve and the gang have put in the background that are representative of, the history of it all. When we have the moving van come in for the first time, Mendelssohn and Melendez, and then Pepper and Patty saying, "Who's that funny-looking kid with the big nose?"
Whoa! Check out the news and that funny-looking kid with the big nose.
But they do all sorts of things like that throughout the movie, and I haven't found them all yet myself. There's so many little Easter eggs hidden in there. It's just fun to look for.
One of the things that was amazing, as we worked on the film, all of our story meetings, as I worked with Craig Schulz and Brian Schulz and Neil, we would have all of our script meetings in Sparky's office, in the office where he drew the comic strip day in and day out. And I'd look down at that drawing table and I'd see that little collection of pens. There was one pen nib that he used, a brush, ink, and a piece of Bristol board. The simplest tools, and from that place, he touched the world.
Charles Schulz left us such an amazing legacy, and having this amazing team led by Steve Martino, our director, and the Blue Sky Animation team, and the Schulz family, who were so integral to this. It's really been fun to watch this come to life. I really could not be more proud of this film.
To bring to an audience today all of the wonderful humor, insight, that wonderful heart that Charles Schulz put into that comic strip day in and day out, it was our mission to bring that to the screen and bring that to an audience today.
We have a wonderful little surprise for everyone toward the end of the movie. Snoopy, he gets together with his siblings.
A round of root beers for our hero, the Flying Ape.
It's an homage. It's a quick little beat, but we get to see Snoopy's entire family at the cafe in a single shot.
We really want to showcase all those unique characters that are in there and bring them to life for a new audience, like my kids.
Snoopy came from the Daisy Hill Puppy Farm, and he had all these siblings, and there was Andy and Olaf and Belle and Spike and Marbles. And occasionally they make appearances where his brothers come to see him. He manages to discover his sister lives in Kansas City and goes to visit her by train.
The people that are working on this project have such an appreciation, such a care for that history that you can really see it translate on the big screen.
I love these characters.
Snoopy, having so many siblings, it's pretty easy to see how people can relate to at least one of those, if not all of those.
It's funny, they all kind of look like Snoopy, but they have different coloring or different, hairstyle. Like some are fluffy and Olaf's kind of round.
I'm not too sure why the other dogs are called the names that they are, but Andy was actually one of Schultz's favorite dogs, so I believe the name came from that.
I think to some people who know Peanuts and understand what these characters are about, there's a universal appeal, there's a fun to them that's hard to deny.
I think people are generally drawn to animal characters, especially anthropomorphic animal characters.
What we find in the end is they all come together to celebrate with Snoopy. Of course, this is a moment when the Red Baron gets him one final time.
Hi, I'm Steve Martino, the director of Peanuts. Today I'm going to give you a lesson on how to draw Snoopy. Use the pause and play button to pause the video and practice every line as many times as you wish. Let's draw Snoopy sitting. First, I'm going to draw his ear, and then around the top of his head, and then around the front of his face. You're going to use long, bold, thick lines. He's got a tiny little neck, and of course, a collar. Draw those lines so they almost touch each other, but not completely. Snoopy's collar is shaped like a small rectangle. Pause the video to practice drawing Snoopy's head, neck, and collar, and then push play when you're ready to continue. From there, let's draw his arm and his paw. Snoopy's arm is one line with a couple of strokes at the bottom for his paw. And when he sits down, his 2 feet look like 2 giant Easter eggs. Remember, just 2 big ovals. When they face us, you see the bottoms of his feet. Then add those 3 striped lines. Let's finish up with his body while we're here. Pause the video now to practice drawing Snoopy's feet and the last part of his body. Push play when you're ready to continue. Now we add his nose, his 2 eyes, some eyebrows for expression, and of course a great big smile. Watch this replay to learn where to put Snoopy's nose, eyes, and eyebrows. And don't forget about that big smile. That's important. Practice drawing Snoopy's nose, eyes, eyebrows, and smile. We'll come down and we'll finish off with his tail. Snoopy doesn't have a long tail, so remember, keep it short. Add a little bit of shadow so it looks like he's sitting on the ground, or in this case, his doghouse. Shadows are very important in drawing cartoons. Watch this replay and practice drawing your shadows. And of course, don't forget to shade in his black ear. Pause the video now, and you give it a try. Push play when you're ready to continue. Now there's a quick lesson on how to draw Snoopy. Let's take a look at it one more time. Keep practicing, keep drawing, and most importantly, keep having fun. I'm Steve Martino. Thanks for watching. I'm Steve Martino, the director of the Peanuts movie. So I'm going to show you how to draw our favorite little yellow Peanuts character, Woodstock. Feel free to use the pause button so you can stop the video and practice along the way. Push play when you're ready to continue. The secret to drawing Woodstock is to use long, continuous strokes. I start at the very top feather and come down around his beak. And remember that Woodstock has a very big head, about twice the size of his body. Don't be shy with your pen, be bold, just like Woodstock. Proportions are key. Woodstock's head and feathers make up about half of Woodstock. Watch this replay carefully to draw Woodstock's head and feathers. And remember to use bold lines. His body, wings, and feet make up the other half. Woodstock's feet each have 3 lines. Push the pause button now to practice drawing Woodstock's wings and feet. Then push play when you're ready to continue. Let's add Woodstock's tail. Be sure to draw that one line down the middle. Now make a couple of lines for his bright little eyes. And last, but most importantly, draw that great big Woodstock smile. Those are 2 bold, thick lines at a slight downward angle and a big round smile, because Woodstock's always laughing and smiling. And that's how you draw Woodstock. Let's watch it through again. The more you practice, the more your drawings will start to take flight. Now you draw Woodstock any way you like. And remember, dream big. Who knows where it will take you? Maybe we'll be learning to draw your characters one day. Hi, I'm Steve Martino, the director of Peanuts. Follow along with me for a fun way to draw Charlie Brown. Push the pause button on your device to take all the time you need. Push play when you're ready to continue. First, we're going to start with the head. Charlie Brown's head is shaped almost like a big circle. We're going to start on one side and continue almost all the way around, stopping just before completing the circle. Next, we'll draw his ears. The first ear completes the shape of his head. The second ear goes just outside the opposite side of the circle. Pause the video now to practice drawing Charlie Brown's head and ears. Then push play when you're ready to continue. Next, we're going to draw his nose and eyes. Watch this replay to see where to place Charlie Brown's eyes. See how his nose goes right in the middle of his head? with 2 small dots on each side. Of course, everyone loves Charlie Brown's squiggly little hair. Here's how to draw it. Pause the video now so you can practice drawing his hair as well. Push play when you're ready to continue. And of course, there's that big Charlie Brown smile. Now that we've finished his face, let's move on to his neck. We'll make 2 small lines straight down and add a little shadow. Pause the video to practice drawing Charlie Brown's neck. Don't forget to add the shadow, then push play when you're ready to continue. Next, let's draw Charlie Brown's shirt. We'll start with the collar. It's shaped like a V. And from there, we'll continue on to his arm and his chest. Watch this replay to see how to draw Charlie Brown's collar, arm, and chest. Charlie Brown always wears his shirt with the zigzag design. To make this, we'll draw 2 zigzags, one on top of the other, then color it in. Finally, we're going to draw his hand at the bottom of his arm and then his waist. That's a bold line at the bottom. Take a look at this replay to see how to draw Charlie Brown's hand and waist. Well, there's a quick lesson on how to draw Charlie Brown. For more fun, draw your own Charlie Brown, or practice drawing Snoopy in Woodstock with me.
Huh? Oh.
Wow.
Who could that be? For me? Good grief.